Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the Undiscovered Games video podcast, where we take a look at the lesser known board games of the world and share those with you. This is a very undiscovered game today. It's a tile placement game from the year 2008 called HORUS. This was put out by Mayfair Games, designed by H. Jean Venez, and the box art is beautifully illustrated by the great Michael Menzel. As you probably know by now, I'm a big fan of Menzel, and this cover is another stunning piece of artwork. Now, he did not do the in-game art here. The in-game art was done by Pete Fenlon, and Fenlon did a great job as well because the game looks great on the table. Really good color choices here, just aesthetically very pleasing. So HORUS is an open-ended tile placement game. It does not use a game board. Players are going to be building out this map differently every time. It signifies an ancient Egyptian kingdom right next to the Nile River here, and thematically it's a little dry, but that's fine with me because the mechanisms are great here. It uses area majority, so as these regions build out, you want to have more discs in these regions than your opponents by the end of the game, and whoever has the majority of discs in these regions will get the points, and the bigger regions will generate more points. And there are a few little twists in the scoring, which I'll get into in the video, but all in all, it's a very straightforward tile placement game where you're building out the map, and the players build it out differently every game, much like the classic game Carcassonne. Now, if you notice, the title of this video is called Cooler Than Carcassonne, and that's because HORUS does a few things that I believe elevate this game slightly above Carcassonne for me personally. Now, this is definitely more of a gamer's game than Carcassonne. There's a few extra layers to this. It's a little crunchier, but it's still a very mid-weight game. I would say HORUS is probably a 2.5 out of 5 in complexity, and it's a very easy game to learn and teach, but I would still say it's a step up from Carcassonne. It's much more of a gamer's game. It's way more cutthroat, and I don't want to make this a comparison video because I still love the game of Carcassonne. It's an absolute classic that's been in my collection for probably 10 years now. I've played it so much. But because I've played it so much, I've also seen some flaws in that game, especially with the luck of the draw. Well, HORUS mitigates the luck of the draw with card play. It has a nice hand management system, which really elevates the depth of your decisions every time it's your turn. See, on your turn, first you do draw a random tile from the bag and place it, but then you get to play a card from your hand, and the card lets you place another tile of a specific type. Not only that, but every card has a number on it, and the number is going to dictate where you can place your control discs out on the map. So every time you're playing a card, you're weighing both the type of tile you place as well as where you can place your disc. It's a really fun system. It kind of reminds me of multi-use cards, which is one of my favorite mechanisms. Very dynamic game, fluid changing map all the time. You're always reacting to your opponents, and it's very interactive, very cutthroat. So probably not for everybody in that regard, but I have a feeling the Undiscovered Games audience out there is going to love this one. So before I get started on how to play HORUS, make sure you're subscribed right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games to learn more about lesser known board games just like this. All right, let's learn how to play HORUS, and it's worth noting that the rules and the setup are the same for 2, 3, or 4 players here, and I do enjoy this game at all player counts, by the way. To set up the game, give each player 20 control discs in their player color. Give each player a river transport card. It looks like this. It's purple on the back. This just stays face up in front of you until you decide to use it. It's like a one-time use ability. Then you're going to deal a starting hand of 5 cards to each player. So shuffle this deck of cards and deal 5 face down to each player. You can look at your hand, but keep it secret from your opponents. To set up the tiles, first find the beige-backed scarab tiles that look like this. Throw all these into the bag. Then find the 3 starting river tiles. They look like this. You have a starting pyramid in the center and then a boat on either side of the pyramid like this. These boat tiles are called the river end tiles, and these will expand outward as we build out the Nile River and explore it. Now you're going to find the rest of the river tiles and just make a stack near the play area where everybody can reach them. These river tiles are double-sided. They have the river on one side, and then on the back is a beige necropolis symbol. Whenever you play a river tile from this stack, you can either play it as a river to extend the waterway, or you can play it as a necropolis on the backside, and that's just like a blocker tile. I'll get into that in a moment. Finally, find the purple-backed scarab tiles and place these in 4 stacks near the river tiles over here. These are going to be either black, green, beige, or red, so just organize those by color. It's worth noting that the symbols on these tiles do not mean anything in regards to the gameplay, and that can be a little confusing when you're teaching this game because there are different symbols here. Notice, all these different black tiles have different artwork, and I really like that from an aesthetic point of view. It looks nice on the table. It just makes it not so boring looking. However, you need to reiterate that to a new player so they don't get confused. All that matters here is there are 4 different colors of terrain, plus you have your river tiles as well. So that's the entire setup. Again, the setup is the same for 2, 3, or 4 players. It does help when you store your game if you keep all these tiles separate, in separate baggies or little containers or something. If you have them stored properly, it does not take very long to set this game up. All right, so now we're ready to learn how to play Horus. After you determine a start player, play always continues clockwise around the table for the entire game. Your turn consists of 2 simple steps. First, you explore the kingdom. Second, you expand your influence. You always do your turn in this order. So step 1, exploring the kingdom, that just means you draw a tile from the bag and place it on the map. I'll go over the placement rules here in a moment. The second part of your turn, expanding your influence, that just means you play a card from your hand, do the action on the card. The card is first going to let you place another tile of a specific type, and then it's going to let you place one of your control discs onto the map into a size of a region that matches the number on the card. Again, I'll show you how this works in a moment. So after you play your card, your turn is over. Just end your turn by refilling your hand back up to 5 cards. If this draw deck ever runs out, just reshuffle all the discarded cards and form a new draw deck. After you take your turn, the player to your left is going to do the same steps. First, draw a tile from the bag and place it, then play one card from their hand, which lets them place another tile, and place a control disc on the map. They refill their hand back up to 5 cards, and then the next player in clockwise order goes. So you just keep doing this around the table. The game is going to end as soon as 2 of these 5 stacks get emptied. Whoever empties that second stack finishes their turn, and that will end the game immediately. Then we proceed to final scoring, which I'll discuss later in the video. But first, I want to talk about your turn steps in detail, and I'll go over all the rules for placing tiles as well as playing cards. So let me fast forward to a game in progress, and that will help me explain this a little better. So here we are. We're in a 3-player game. It's a few rounds in. The board has been built out a little bit. I am the gold player here, and it's my turn. So step 1, I draw a tile from the bag. Let's say I draw a red tile. This red tile can be placed anywhere on the map adjacent to another tile. I cannot place it diagonally adjacent, but I can place it halfway adjacent or fully adjacent. Notice the tiles have these little hash marks on the sides. That just helps you line them up if you decide to place it halfway adjacent. You do not have to match colors when you place a tile. So if I place this red tile, I could place it up here next to this region of 3 black tiles if I wanted to. Or maybe I want to link up these 2 red regions. We have a red region of 5 here and another red region of 1. I could use the halfway adjacent rule, and now this region of 5 joins this region, and now we have a region of 7 red tiles like this. Or maybe I want to keep these separate and I jut it down here, and this is still 2 separate red regions. You'll see why this stuff matters here in a moment. Another rule to keep in mind when you're placing tiles is you can never completely block in the river end tiles, the ones with the boats on them. The river must always be able to expand outward from these boat tiles. So I could not place this red tile here, for example, because that blocks in one of the river end tiles. But let's just say for my turn here, I drew this red tile and I place it here. So I created a red region with a size of 2. Now I move to the second part of my turn, which is playing one of my cards. So I look through my hand, I pick one of these cards and play it to the table. There's a lot of choices here to consider, but let's just say for this example, I choose to play this card. Now, when you play a card, it shows 2 pieces of information. First, it shows a tile type in the center of the card, and then it has a number at the top. The first thing you look at is the tile. You must place the tile first. So this has a beige desert tile. So I take one beige tile from this stack here and place it anywhere on the map, following those same placement rules from before. So let's say I place it up here and kind of block in this black region a little bit. And then I look at the number on the card. Now this shows a 2. What the 2 says is I can place one of my discs into any region out here that is exactly 2 tiles. So looking out there at the map, there's actually only one place I could put a disc. There are 2 regions of size 2. We have this beige region over here, and then we have this red region here. Both of these are size 2. However, this one already has discs on it. Each tile can only hold one disc, so I cannot place a disc over here. So I would have to place a disc in this red region Again, it's a size 2, which matches the number on my card. So I place a disc into either of these. It doesn't really matter which one of these I place it into. So let's say I place it there. Now here's one thing that makes this game really interesting. The numbers on these cards only go up to 5. And what that means is anytime a region expands beyond 5 tiles, so 6 or more, you cannot place a control disc into that region because the cards only go up to 5 and the number has to match the size of the region where you place your disc. Some of the cards have question marks, and all that means is that can be any number 1 through 5. So any regions that are bigger than 6 are very difficult to get any more discs added to them, but you can do it, and there's 2 ways to do that. One is with this river transport card, which I'm going to talk about later in the video, but this is like a one-time use card that will potentially get one of your discs into a larger than 5 region. But the more common way to sneak into these bigger regions with your discs is by building out smaller regions of that same color and then later linking them together, thus creating a bigger region, and then that way you would be able to get some of your discs into a bigger region. So that's one way you can kind of sneak in. You can put some pressure on your opponents after they think they have a region locked down to themselves. You can kind of sneak in and start building near them, and that will make them nervous, and that will force them to play some blocker tiles and things like that. It's very interactive, in-your-face type of game. You have to keep an eye on all your opponents, and I'll get into more of that as this example unfolds. So that was the end of my turn. After that, I draw back up to 5 cards, and that ends my turn. The card I played just goes into a discard pile, and now it's this player's turn. Now I want to show you what happens if you draw a river tile out of the bag, because what I showed you in the first example is if you draw any one of the 4 terrain colors. But if you draw a river tile from the bag, your turn changes slightly. The first thing you must do is place this river tile wherever one of these river end boat tiles is. So the new river tile replaces one of these boats. So let's say this player puts it here. You take the boat tile off, you put the new tile down. Now this boat tile must touch the tile that you just played, but you can put it however you want. So you could put it like on this side of it, or you could put it over here, you could put it up here, you could jut it over halfway, however you want to do that. It just must touch the tile that you just played. And that's why those end boat tiles can never be boxed in completely. The river always has to be able to expand whenever you draw a river tile from the bag. Now here's where your turn changes a little bit from the normal structure. So normally, you place your tile, then you move on to playing a card. Well, when you draw a river tile, you place that, then you must immediately place another river tile from this stack. You take it from the stack, and you can either play it as a river or on the backside as a necropolis. If you play it as a necropolis, that can go anywhere on the map following the normal placement rules, and the necropolis tiles just clog up the map. They're like blocker tiles. Nobody can place discs on these, but you can place those however you want to kind of strategically block other players from being able to expand and things like that. But if you play it as a riverside, then you can place it anywhere adjacent to the current river. So it does not have to be where these river end tiles are. So in this way, you could branch the river out and create little branches. And it's worth noting, if you do branch the river off, those branches could become boxed in by other players' tile placements, because the only thing that can't be boxed in are these 2 boat tiles. So just keep those things in mind. Now you do have one more option when you're placing this tile from the stack, and that is you can replace one of the boat tiles just like you did in the first part of your turn. So if you do this, let's say this player puts the tile down here, they would pick up this boat tile, put the new tile here. Now this boat tile does not have to touch the tile you just played. Instead, you can put this boat tile anywhere adjacent to the river. So I could put it up here, for example. And this is important because this will change the direction that the river expands, and the river may affect the scoring when we get to that. So I'll discuss the scoring later in the video, but I just want to recap. When you draw a river tile from the bag, first you must replace one of the river end boat tiles, and then that boat tile must touch the tile that you just played. Second, you must take another river tile from this stack and play it either as a necropolis anywhere on the map or as a river anywhere adjacent to the river. If this second river tile replaces one of the boat tiles, then that boat tile can be placed anywhere adjacent to the river. And that's the whole first part of your turn when you draw a river tile. The second part of your turn is exactly the same as before. You play one card and do the actions. So let's say this player plays this card. Now this shows a question mark where the tile is, and that just means they can choose any tile from any one of these stacks, including the river stack. If they choose a river tile, the same rules apply. They could choose to place it adjacent to the river or replace one of the river end tiles and move that river end tile wherever they want, or they could play it as a necropolis. But let's say for this example, the player chooses to play it as a red tile, and they'll place it right here to join these two red regions. Why would they want to do that? Well, that basically negates my disc, which is here. Because remember, the card numbers only go up to 5. So now by joining these two up, I'm not going to be able to add any more of my discs into this region. And they made it larger, which means it's worth more points. And they have the majority and basically knocked me out. So that's one of many, many things that you might think about on your turn. Now, they still have to place a disc out into a level 4 region. So out here we have this green region, which has 4 tiles. However, this player has 3 discs in this region already. So if this player puts a disc here, they're not going to get over top of this player's majority. And even if this gets expanded to 5 tiles, it's going to be hard to get over this player's majority. So maybe this player instead puts a disc over here in this level 4 region and competes for the majorities over here. So that's what they do. They put their disc here because it's a level 4 region. Again, that number must match your card. That's the end of their turn, so they draw back up to 5 cards, and then it's this player's turn. Now for this player's turn, I want to show you how to use this river transport card. So again, first they will draw a tile from the bag. Let's say they draw a green tile and they place it here. The second part of their turn is playing a card. Now, if they don't want to play a card from their hand, they could use their one-time use ability, which is this river transport card. Remember, everybody starts the game with one of these face up in front of them. If you decide to use this, this is the card that you play on your turn. So you don't also play a card from your hand, you play this card instead. If you play this card, first you must place 2 tiles from the river stack. Now you can use these either as river or necropolis or one of each. You'll notice the card has 2 tiles showing to remind you of that. And it's worth noting the placement rules are the same when you place a river tile from the stack as they are in the previous example, where you can place it anywhere adjacent to the river, or you can replace one of the boat tiles at the end and then move that boat tile anywhere adjacent to the river. So that's the first part of playing this card. You play 2 tiles from this stack. The second part of playing this card is you get to move one of your discs from any region that's adjacent to the river to any other region that's adjacent to the river. So in this example, this player could move their disc from here because this region is adjacent to the river. Now the tile itself does not have to be touching the river. It's just they're in a region that's adjacent to the river. So they can take their disc from here, travel along the river, and they can place it up into this red region, for example, because the red region is also adjacent to the river. So by doing that, they are now tied for first place majority in this large red region. And that's the only other way you can get a disc into a region that has more than 5 tiles. So you're always looking for that perfect moment to play this card, because once you play this, you don't get to do that for the rest of the game. So after you play that card, that's the end of your turn, and then it goes to the next player in clockwise order and so on around the table. Again, you're going to keep doing this until 2 of these stacks are empty. As soon as a player empties out that second stack, they finish out their turn, and then you proceed to final scoring. Now, before I talk about final scoring, I have a couple tiny little rules to cover. These are just little clarifications and a couple little wrinkles. The very first round of the game, when it's your turn, all the cards in your hand can count as level 1. So you just ignore the numbers on your cards, and any one of them can be a number 1 just for that very first turn of the game. And that just kind of helps get some of your discs out, because a lot of those early regions are only going to be 1 tile big. So that's the first rules wrinkle to keep in mind. Another one is there is 1 tile in this bag called the HORUS temple. Whenever you draw this out of the bag, the only rule is this must be placed adjacent to the river and not touching any other regions. So you could place this like here, for example. And if you cannot legally place it, then you just discard it. The HORUS temple is going to affect the scoring. And again, I'll get into that in the next section of the video. But just know if you draw it, it has to be placed alone by itself, touching the river. The final wrinkle in the rulebook is when a tile stack over here runs out, then all players should discard any cards in their hand that match that type. So let's say all the green tiles run out over here, then everybody should immediately discard any cards that have the green tile on them. Now you're still going to get 5 cards at the beginning of your turn, so if you're down some cards, just draw up to 5 to start your turn, but you should never have any cards in your hand with tiles that match empty stacks. Now on the opposite side of that same coin, sometimes you can play a card and the number, shows the region size where you place a disc. Sometimes you're not going to be able to place a disc because there are no available regions of that number, and that is fine. You would just play the card, place the tile showing on the card, and then not place a disc. Okay, now let's talk about the all-important endgame scoring. Again, as soon as a player depletes the second stack of tiles over here, they finish their turn and the game ends immediately. The first thing to know is every tile is worth 1 point, very simply. So a region of 7 tiles is worth 7 points, where a region of 3 tiles is worth 3 points. The points are awarded to whoever has the most discs in that region. However, if there's a tie for most discs, then all the tied players get the full points. It's very simple. Now here's the twist. All regions max out at 10 points. So even if you have a region with 15 tiles, it's still only worth 10 points to whoever has the most discs. So in this example, we have a region here of 13 green tiles. Well, the majority player is the gold player. They'll win this region, but they only get 10 points because the regions max out at 10. Now, another thing to keep an eye on is any regions that are completely surrounded by water. So like island regions are going to score double. So for example, here we have a region of 3 tiles. The gold player has the majority of discs. This normally would be worth 3 points, but it's surrounded by water. Therefore, this is worth 6 points. Now it's worth noting, once again, regions never score more than 10. So even when you double them, you have to cap it off at 10 points. So if you had like a level 6 region and it was completely enclosed by water, this would only be worth 10 points. You would double it, which would be 12, but then you would have to bring it back down to 10. Another thing doubles points, and that is the Horus Temple. Any regions touching the Horus Temple at the end of the game are worth double. So in this example, this region here would actually be worth 8 points. It's 4 tiles, but one of them is touching the Horus Temple. So this region's majority owner would score 8 points. If this region was also enclosed by water, you would double it again. So double for touching the Horus Temple and double for being enclosed completely by water. However, once again, you have to cap it off at 10 points. So in that same example, if you had a level 4 region touching the Horus Temple and enclosed by water, you would double it for 8 points, double it again, which would be 16, which is greater than 10, so it comes back down to a maximum of 10 points. And that's how you do the scoring. You just go region by region. You have to check for islands and check for adjacency to the Horus Temple. Those regions will be doubled. At the end of that, whoever has the most points is the winner. If there are any ties for most points, there is no tiebreaker in the rulebook, and that's kind of a bummer. I really wish games would put tiebreakers in the rulebook, especially when they are in-your-face competitive games like this. So if anybody has any suggestions for a tiebreaker, drop those in the comments below. But for now, that concludes the tutorial section of the video, and now I'm going to get into my rating and review. So if you look at the Board Game Geek listing for Horus, you're going to see it's at a 5.9 out of 10, and that is just absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. If you're using the Board Game Geek rating system, like this should at least be a 6.5 to a 7.5 on that scale. But for me personally, on my scale, this is a 9.5 out of 10. And that's a solid A if you look at it as a school grading system, which is how I rate games. 9.5 out of 10 is a top tier game in my collection, and Horus is just that. It's an open-ended tile placement game, so it's entirely up to the players how the board, develops. Every time you play, it's going to be vastly different. You're going to have some very deep decision making with a very simple rule set, which I love. I would say if you like the game Genesis by Reiner Knizia, which I covered earlier on this channel, you'll probably like the game of Horus. Also, if you like the game of Carcassonne, you'll probably like this as a next level Carcassonne. To me, this game fixes a lot of things I don't like about Carcassonne. Again, I still really like Carcassonne. I will always enjoy that game. It's such a classic, but Horus is the gamer's game version of Carcassonne. And it does some different stuff too. It's not exactly like that game. I'm just saying, if you like Carcassonne, or maybe you've played Carcassonne to death like I have, and you're just kind of tired of it, try this game. It introduces some new concepts, some new thinking patterns, but it still scratches that same general itch of tile placement with no borders, and you can kind of build it out however you want. To me, the highlight of this game is the hand management of your cards. I absolutely love the card play in this game. Like I said earlier, it sort of feels like multi-use cards, but it's not really multi-use. It's just whenever you play a card, you're going to get to do two things, and I like that those two things are completely independent of each other. You place a tile, and then you look at the number on the card, which shows where you can place your control disc. And I just like that those are two completely separate ideas in this game. Again, back to Carcassonne, when you place a tile, you have to place your meeple on the tile that you just placed. Well, in this game, you're drawing a tile from the bag, you place that, you place another tile based on your card, and then you place a control disc completely irrelevant of where you placed your tiles. It might be on the tile you just placed, or it might be in a completely different area of the board. That opens up the decisions and the strategizing so much in this game, and that just elevates this so far beyond Carcassonne for me, and that's why I like Horus and the way this game does it. I also really love the scoring system here. I like that it maxes out the regions at 10 points, so you can't have somebody just run away with a region. You know, it's like it's forcing you to kind of spread out your influence a little bit. And I also love how the card numbers only go up to 5. That creates some really interesting dynamics in the game between the players, because if you can get a region of 5 and get 3 of your discs there, then all of a sudden you can try to build that region out and make it, a size 10, because it's harder for your opponents to get their discs into a region bigger than 5. Now you still have to keep an eye on them so they don't build smaller regions and try to join up with yours. And obviously players can play those river transport cards to get one disc moved over, but there's ways to kind of lock these regions down, and ultimately you want to score the most points with the fewest amount of discs. You don't want to have 3 discs in a level 3 region, only worth 3 points. So there's a lot to keep an eye on in that regard. You have to watch out for your opponents creeping in on your territory. You have to watch out for people blocking you with the river, blocking you with the necropolis tiles. There is so much good stuff going on in this game, and it's just a lot of little subtle rules that create some really deep decisions. Now, I want to talk briefly about the player count. I've played this game several times. I've played it at all player counts, and I want to say, generally speaking, I like the game at all player counts. But what's weird about it is it does some things at 2 players that I wish it did at 4 players. Mainly speaking about the game length. I feel like the game length is appropriate at 2 players. I feel like your regions get built out to an appropriate size, but what I don't like at 2 players is there's a lot of tit for tat. It's just a lot of back and forth, stealing points here, then your opponent steals points here. It's just a very linear back and forth battle, which is fine, and it's fun too, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I love when you add a 3rd player or a 4th player, you really feel the game pulling you in so many different directions and you can't do everything, and that's the type of tension that I really like in a game like this. The problem is when you play with 4 players, I feel like the game ends too soon. It ends after 2 of those stacks get depleted, and to me, every time I've played this at 4 players, I just wanted more. Now, I guess I would rather have a game leaving me, wanting more than a game overstaying its welcome, but I just didn't feel like I could experience the full effect of the game as it should be at 4 players. So I almost think you should go until 3 stacks are depleted or something like that, just to prolong the game a little bit. I have not tried that, but so far I really, really like this game at 3 players. I feel like you get the best of both worlds there. You have 2 other opponents to keep an eye on, so the game is pulling you in more than one direction, and you get to build out these areas a little bit. The stacks don't get depleted as quickly, before it's your turn again. Now, you could still try to rush the end of the game if you want to, rush out, one of the stacks. That is a strategy that you can try in this game. If you're doing really well, you could just try to, end the game really quickly, which is another thing I like. It's a player-driven game. 3 players to me is the sweet spot. 2 players, I just wish there was a little bit more, multi-directional thinking, if you will. Maybe there's some variant out there where you could add a 3rd dummy player or something like that. With 4 players, I just wish the stacks didn't run out so quickly before it was your turn again. And again, maybe there's a way to modify that. So that's my thoughts on the player count. Still, I highly recommend this game no matter what player count you're playing at. This is definitely a good game to check out if you like cutthroat tile placement, area control type games. games, player-driven games, games with simple rules but very deep decisions and very tactical decisions, check out HORUS. So let me know in the comments, have you ever played this game? Have you ever played a game that looks similar to this? What's your favorite tile placement game, specifically an open-ended tile placement game with no game board? Let me know that stuff in the comments below. I love to chat about board games, and if you like to learn about lesser-known, older, forgotten board games like this, make sure you're subscribed right here on YouTube at undiscovered_games. I'm also on Instagram at undiscovered_games, where I post a lot of written reviews, cool pictures, some unboxing reels, and other games that don't make it to my YouTube channel. So check out my Instagram page, and make sure you check out the video description below for more ways that you can help support my channel. I have a super thanks button down there on YouTube. I have a digital tip jar in the description below. It's just a PayPal link. You can leave any amount you like. That is not expected whatsoever. I just really appreciate all of your support so far, and the easiest, best way to help the channel is to click subscribe, and make sure all your board gaming friends click subscribe as well right here on YouTube. As long as my subscribers keep going up, I'll produce content like this on a regular basis. I really appreciate everybody watching and joining me today on this episode. I'll be back with another great undiscovered game in a couple weeks. I'm working on another 2-player games episode. I'm also working on a kids games episode, which is going to be really fun. And episode 50 is right around the corner. That's going to be my top 50 favorite board games of all time. So you don't want to miss those. Those are coming up in the next few weeks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.